Hello everyone, this is Sofia Smallstorm. I'm doing another podcast for you. Thank you for emails that you are sending me saying that you're enjoying the podcasts. And I too wish I could do them more frequently, but just to get a couple of guests a month, you would not believe how many cancellations and rescheduling one has to go through. So my hat goes off to the people who do a podcast or an interview every day, because that to me would be an insurmountable amount of scheduling work. So anyway, I have today a very dear person who has great intentions and has been putting these out for quite a while now. I only got to know him recently in a more personal way. I had known of him. And his name is Gardner. So he has his website, zengardner.com, and let's let him give us a little lead up to how he has become the philosopher that he is today through his writings and his own interviews and shows. Welcome, Zen.
Thanks, Sophia. It's a real honor, and it's really great to get to know you as well. You're a beautiful soul, and I tell people, boy, her name's Smallstorm, but she sure packs a wallop. You are contributing such important information, and your spirit is so clear and informative and clearly compassionate. Anyway, I want to honor you that way, and thank you for being here. It's my story is maybe a lot of people will relate to it or not, but it's I was born in 1949. I went through the 50s when things looked all hunky-dory in the United States. And I had a very happy childhood until my family became quite dysfunctional, and my father became more successful in the corporate world. And I was a Woodstock child pretty much through the late 60s. And when I went to university, I was expected to be a PhD like my father, and had a lot of things going for me. But I woke up in university with thanks to the help of psychedelics and the climate of the times. The war was on. Things were clearly wrong. Almost everybody in my generation came from some sort of dysfunctionality, and were not happy and knew the direction that things were going were seriously wrong. So that's, the term military-industrial complex was in everyday language in those days, Eisenhower's famous term. So when I woke up my first time, I've been through what I say is like 5 different levels of it, and it continues. Awakening is a continual process. But I became very involved in mysticism. I'd always been very spiritually inclined since I was a child, but I was raised in a Protestant home and virtually hardly ever went to church or cracked the Bible or anything, but I was hungry for spiritual truths, like so many of us. But it was never affirmed, which causes major conflict since our very early childhood. And when I got into mysticism and studying Alan Watts and Krishnamurti and Gurdjieff and so many of these teachers, I got into Eastern thought. It made me realize the path of my life was the most important thing, and the big questions needed to be answered. Who was I? Why was I here? Where did I come from? Where am I? And these are not addressed, as you know, in mainstream education, nor in families, except to give you the religious answer, some kind of structure, some kind of a hierarchical, nonsense that people can rely on, like a back brace, and then go on into the corporate world. But when I left college, I didn't get my degree, much to my father's chagrin, and I just sort of wandered off. I went off to California. I went to university in New York, upstate New York, and after California, I was there and I got disillusioned because the scene that I heard about was just rife with drugs and who's the coolest and too much of this. It was a new society. It was a new set of constructs, and I got very disillusioned. I became very introspective, and I guess sad. So I decided to go out into the world. And for the next 20 years, I lived in India 5 years. I lived in the Middle East for 3, Latin America for 10, hit different countries in Europe. I actually raised my kids, 2 of them born in India and 1 born in Iran, actually during the revolution. So I got a real life schooling that you would not get in suburban New York in the least. And in fact, to this day, as you probably know, most Americans have never set foot outside the United States. But and following that, I went through other transitions. I got into other things. I went through different paradigms. I got into sort of mystical Christianity and the potential solutions of the life of Jesus and how that can be lived on this planet. And having come from the Western paradigm, of course. And then, of course, I was balancing it with the Sufis and the Vedic traditions and different things like that. But I was wandering around pretty lost, actually, trying to find myself. But I was happy because I was on the quest and I was being true to my heart. And after Latin America for 10 years, went back to the States and hit another paradigm where with my second mate, we both had a lot of kids and grandkids by this time, a growing number of grandkids, and we had to raise some funds and got into things we'd never been into before. Both of us coming from pretty much an alternative, post-teen year break off from the system, and that was another paradigm. But it all came to a head. I guess it was around the it was about 2005, 2006, when everything blew up, and I knew it was a signal from the universe. Get back to your roots. It's time. I was looking to set up a foundation, and I had all these weird ways that I was going to try to make an impact by that time. And that's when I started writing, and that's when everything started coming out. I've been an editor. I've been a writer. I've worked in television stations, radio stations. I've always been very fascinated by and interested in media, reporting, coming to truth about things and trying to formulate it for myself. I write songs, I write poetry. And when this latest epiphany happened, it brought out something that just was absolutely brand new in my life. It was like Krakatoa going off when everything converged. And I found my voice. I just became honest and straightforward. And I wasn't trying to stylize myself. I wasn't trying to make a name for myself. I didn't know if anybody would ever read what I'm writing. And things started happening because for me, I was tapping into truth. It was truth to me. And I put it out there, and it turned out to be truth to a lot of people. And philosophy is, really essentially the love of wisdom. It really, it's a very underlying current in any human soul or heart. We have this hunger and love for wisdom, and for love, and it's a form of love. And I love words. I love language, and I love trying to decipher what's going on. I have a very analytical mind. And but I'm also, I love creativity. So that's how the writing began. And now it's gone crazy places. I'm flabbergasted. My book that I put out 3 months ago, You Are the Awakening, is getting picked up all over the place. It's getting rave reviews from from readers. Not, I didn't. It's self-published, so it's not out there in the mainstream. But I sure wish it would be. But it's happening. But that's true of so many people. I'm just one voice of many who are erupting with this shift in consciousness that is coming through. It's seeping through the matrix. It's seeping through the walls of the prison we've been bound in, and it's unstoppable. And I'm very inspired about it. I'm very encouraged about it. And I like to point out the bright side of it, the empowering side of it, despite the darkness. And believe me, I have researched this stuff, to its very depths. And I know how dark this stuff is and how difficult it is to get through. But that's more or less my story. That's kind of how I got here, and I'm very inspired about our current situation as far as the awakening, and the fact that I'm allowed to be here during this time. I think this is an extremely opportune moment in history. Call it history, but I mean it's the cycle we're in. We can't escape it. Just like we're living in a body, we cannot escape it. We are here, and until our body expires. And I want to make the best of it. I want to encourage others to do the same, find the same empowerment and inspiration. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. I hope I didn't go on for too long.
Okay, Zen. Well, the interview's over. This would be the shortest one I've ever done. So thanks. Thanks for being there. No, I'm just kidding. So listen, I'm going to be hard on you, all right? For the sake of the people who haven't gotten into this euphoric ecstasy about the shift in consciousness. So let me ask you to start with, what shift in consciousness?
I guess what I've been trying to do in some posts with people who are very skeptical about this so-called awakening, and they go down to Walmart to look for it, or Home Depot, and they go, what are you talking about? I'm not seeing it. Well, the evidence of what's going on, this vibrational change, is extremely, extremely powerful once people are able to perceive it. Much of it is intuitive, and that's the slippery part. That's where people think it's woo-woo and New Age-ish and all that stuff. And for the record, I think the whole New Age thing is completely off course and a real decoy and full of baloney. I mean, there's sincere people, of course, but it's a real diversion. I mean, that's a broad brush, calling it New Age like that, and people might consider me that way. But anyone who really gets into what I write about, they realize I talk about brass tacks, and I don't hold back about anything, any subject, and try to put it in perspective. But this change that we're going through, it's very subtle, yet it's very manifest. The manifestations have to do with changes in society. I like to track it through language. When you notice the terms that are being used now in the mass media versus 10 years ago, the Matrix is tossed around now like a commonplace term. It's not just because of the movie. It's because of the concept. It's because of the awareness that it brings. Words like Zionism or the Holocaust or things that were heavily stigmatized words are now thrown around, even if derogatorily. They're in public view. Transhumanism, people didn't even know what that was. It's out there. The awareness is increasing. Call it awareness. This transitional phase, awareness of geoengineering. Okay, it's a fight. It's a slog to get people to even recognize what's happening to their skies, but it's happening. Greater and greater extent is happening by the day. The effects of electromagnetic frequencies, or the vaccines. Look at this vaxxed video phenomenon going on and the stir that it's caused. Now we see on the alternative media, places that you and I and people like us go to regularly, as of course that they're going to reinforce this, but you're going to also see it leaking into the mainstream, so-called mainstream, despite this blockade that they've put up. And I think the media is one of, if not the most complicit organ in this societal clampdown. But these things are happening. They're coming to light, whether it's land grabs, fracking. Look what's happening. I've got a dear friend, Ian Crane, in England, and he's been fighting on this front for a long time. He's an ex-oil executive, and he's very passionate about the dangers of this and what happens to local communities. 750 local communities have activated in England to fight this. 750. And some of these are little old ladies, octogenarians in wheelchairs. It is remarkable. And they may not know about chemtrails. They may not know about all, the Federal Reserve or, the extent of the royal family's, perfidy and all that stuff. but they've got something very real to fight about. And these kind of community actions are popping up all over. And what's happening is people are talking. They're communicating. They're breaking barriers that have been set by these societal engineers, for decades. Don't talk to each other, watch your TV. Obviously those aren't the commands, but that's what the life we're led into. And these sorts of manifestations are extremely empowering. I live down in Uruguay, and there's an expatriate community. I mean, that means people who've moved out of their home country to live somewhere else, from many nations. And it's not predominantly American. There's Canadians, but mostly Europeans. 95% are aware of all these issues, virtually all these issues. And they're talking together. They want to see how they can, we've had some meetings, how they can stop the spraying of glyphosate, Roundup on the crops around here, how to stop it in the stores, bringing attention to the pollution in local lakes and the water supply. I mean, it's remarkable. I wrote a letter to the president here and handed it to him about several of these issues. I never got an answer as I was promised, but you can make those kind of contacts here. But this kind of thing, I know people in Ecuador are doing this. I know people in Costa Rica who are doing this. Brazil, there's a lot of activity going on, but obviously it doesn't get the publicity that the mainstream junk does. But it's going on, and when you're in touch with it, you sense this excitement, this activity, this groundswell. Well, this is one manifestation of what we're talking about, this so-called awakening of consciousness. Because consciousness has so many different elements. There's, it's primarily a spiritual, vibrational tuning that's awakening our inner being, this eternal, wonderful presence that we each are. And as it comes alive, it manifests in different ways. So for me, maybe I'm a little more intuitive than most, but I'm finding I get responses to my articles, comments on my website, all kinds of correspondence saying, yeah, I feel it too. This is exactly what's happening to me. And they tell me stories about their parents, about their friends, how their brother woke up, or how this person didn't wake up, and how this big dichotomy is happening of people who don't wake up, and how weird they're getting. There's this great chasm forming in between. Of course, there's a continuum between the two, but these manifestations are there, and that's where I draw my conviction. Those are external. For me, it's an internal thing.
Okay, I'm going to stop you because I need to be able to drill into this a little bit with you. Okay, so you've told us that you are inspired by signs that you're seeing all around you from people from different population groups on different subjects, a range of different subjects. And these signs appear to be of people waking up to the matrix, the reality that's being, that we're cloaked in. That's not the real or the good way of that life could go on this planet. So that's great. I don't see that. So maybe I'm blind, maybe I'm not intuitive enough. I see that the activist world, the alternative internet network is awake and alive and humming with all kinds of stories and emails and forwards. I don't see it showing up in the mainstream in ways that are truly not Pied Piper misleadings. For instance, I'll give you an example. This Vaxxed thing. The guy who made the movie Vaxxed, I watched the interview, and in it he said, we're interested in safe vaccines. Well, if you understand how vaccines work, they're not safe. There's nothing safe about a vaccine. Nothing. So to present to the world that you want to look for a safe vaccine, to me, is a profoundly misleading statement. And it doesn't make me excited in any way that people are now waking up, because somebody will come along someday and say, look, hey, we have a safe vaccine. So this goes on and on and on in all of the places that I look and I see the subjects that you're bringing up being introduced in mainstream. If they're introduced at all, there is a completely incorrect premise that goes along with them. And I could sit here and I could name all of these, but I've decided to keep my mouth shut because it doesn't make me any friends. It makes me too critical, hypercritical. But once you start plumbing the depths of these assault programs, you really look for the crux of why they're harmful. And then you start inspecting what's showing up in the mainstream media about them. You will see that there is a Pied Piper working in those stories. And that's what I don't trust. So I remain skeptical. I do not see a consciousness surge like you do.
Well, I really appreciate what you said, and I like the fact that you are the way you are. I think that's a very healthy, and I'm not trying to get the rah-rahs out of people. I'm just trying to say that there's an aspect that where there's a lot to be encouraged about. But I agree with you. I mean, this it's horrendous that this vax thing, MMR has can cause autism, but the other ones are okay, kind of thing. Insane. In fact, I'm working on an article now called "The Infinite Futility" and the Gordian Knot. There's so many things that are misleading right down the road that never really cross over to where we need to be. GMO labeling. I mean, come on. If they do label them, how do you know they're not GMO? That's BS. I'm extremely skeptical. I look at these things very critically. Whenever they give you some kind of assurance, when it does become public, just like this whole scam about these Panama Papers and all, if it does get any coverage, it's being used to, or can be easily used by these people to push a compromised agenda, and anything that's compromised ain't it. And I totally agree with you. So I'm not glossy-eyed about what's going on. I'm inspired about this energetic bubbling up that's happening that we don't know where it's going to go. And of course they're going to screw with it. Of course they're going to make things into diversions and adulterate it and compromise everything they possibly can. And we fall for it. People will promote it even though they're so-called alternative. I'm very careful about what I look at and what I read and interpret. I'm not Pollyanna in the least. I'm extremely aware of this BS, which is why I write the things that I do, to pull them apart, deconstruct concepts, so we can really deal with basic facts of information. And that's what I love about your attitude, because it's good, it's healthy. And I don't see you as a skeptic, because obviously by the very passion that you display in what you do, it's out of concern, care, love, and in a way that is, to me, a manifestation of this awakening. You have been called to this. Many are called to this. We're all trying to find the best way to go about it, and our variety is great, but we've got to watch out for the bullshit, and there's tons of it. And if it comes out good, they jump on it and try to twist it. So, we're becoming more and more aware of that. I mean, a good example is like the false flag phenomenon. Look how many people can pick up not only the after the fact false flag symptoms, but even before the fact. They contact each other. We're both friends with Ole Damagard, and he's got a network of people now. When there's drills going on, they go out there and start filming. They check where the cones are, where they're blocking off the streets, what kind of vehicles are around, because these are often predecessors to false flags. That's pretty cool. It's something. It doesn't mean we're totally stopping them, but if we're throwing them off in the least, it's a manifestation of this arising consciousness. Now, we may all get blown up. The World War III might happen. We might get hit by an asteroid. That's really not our issue, honestly, because it's about personal activation, personal responsibility. We don't have to carry the whole world on any of our shoulders. We do what each of us is called to do. And this is to me, the spark that is igniting a lot of people. They may not recognize it. I mean, you had this beautiful conversation with David Icke. I loved your interview. And when you asked him that beautiful question about what can people do? How do they use their intention? What is intention? How do they activate their lives? And his explanation was brilliant. Your conversation was extremely empowering. And these are the kinds of things that, to me, are the most important. If each person finds their place, then, should there be a place? I mean, obviously, this is a constantly morphing playing field we're on, and we're in a wondrous universe we barely understand. But if which is why, again, I called my book "You Are the Awakening." It's all about the individual, and when that happens, each one of us is this so-called revolution. When that happens, things happen around them. And this thing called the morphic field. There's these other elements, other dimensions that get affected as well, that change the vibrational frequency in levels that we're not fully aware of, just like we can't see the full spectrum of light and energy. All we see is our little span, our little bitty window. But we know it's there. We know it's there. And even science has proven they pushed it out a certain way, but you can almost be guaranteed it goes out infinitely. But
okay, so again, I'm drilling here. So good. I'm going to start speaking your language a little bit, and I wanted to bring up something that occurred to me last night, which is that a while ago I was introduced to a philosophy that is practiced by a certain following. I won't say which it is, but it doesn't really matter. But they defined knowledge as the energy of the past and wisdom as the energy of the future. And that really made sense to me, because when we gain knowledge, we understand things. We know how things are put together, how things happened. So I can see that being defined as relating to the past. The future is unknown. So I define the future as being in a dimension that we don't really have access to, because it's not here with us yet. It's happening. We're rolling into the future every second, because each new second is the future, right? So wisdom applies more to it has a greater scope. It includes knowledge, perhaps, but it also envelops this, it's a plus to this dimension. It's an extra dimensional quality. People who are wise, they become our mentors and our guides, because they know how to deal with the volatility of the third dimension, and they can navigate themselves and us through all of this more effectively as we see them. So what you're bringing up, what you sense intuitively, and what I may not sense as strongly as you do, and others as well, and that's why I asked you the question, what shift in consciousness? So what you sense intuitively is coming from something in you that I would call this wisdom that you have developed and gained as a consequence of moving through the tunnel of acquiring knowledge.
Very interesting. I like that. The knowledge is the energy of the past, wisdom the energy of the future. It's it's a little bit simplistic, but it's very powerful. The thing about wisdom, well, I'm sure you implied this, but it's got to be the truth. It's the truth that resonates. There's so-called wisdom within certain societal paradigms that, you never do this, or old wives' tales and all this kind of stuff that can be really off course, but people consider wisdom. But we're talking about real wisdom and real, I guess you'd call it esoteric knowledge, meaning it's just maybe some people don't fully hear it or see it or grasp it yet, but it's there, but it resonates with others and they find it empowering, or it brings light into their understanding or something to that effect.
Yeah, so wisdom survives the test of time and the ages. Knowledge can be much more finite and can be revealed to be incorrect as well, you know. So at one point people thought that, you know, having leeches applied to our skin and letting them drain us of blood would cleanse the body, and all it does is remove blood, which you need when you're ailing. So one could call that faulty knowledge or a faulty premise. But this idea of being able to handle and survive, this is what you and David Icke and other people seem to have more of than the swath of conspiracy theorists and alternative thinkers who are extremely agitated about what's happening and fearful of how bad it could really get. Now, most of humanity is built out of and built from fear, as I see them, and they worry about eventualities and possibilities, and they strategize to avoid those as much as they can. So David Icke said at the end of the interview I did with him that this is not about stockpiling food and weapons. This is not how we're going to win this, let's call it a struggle or a tug of war or whatever. I don't want to call it a battle or a war specifically because they're very different terms that I don't want to be in any battle, right?
Call it a challenge. Maybe.
Okay, a challenge, but it's a very long-term challenge. This challenge didn't start like right after World War II or something.
Exactly right.
So we're in this challenge. It's a challenge of intention, really, because we seem to be pitted against a force, a cabal that has gained control over us because of our dim-wittedness and unawareness and sleepiness. While we were asleep, snoring away, for millennia, they have managed to talk us out of our own power and talk themselves into power, and now they control the courts, the militaries, the governments, everything. So we're kind of, you know, we're snowed right now, and we have to do something about it if we want to prevail or to turn this challenge around. And you and Ike talk about how to prevail in a very mystical, spiritual way that I think most people don't understand. And it must have to do with the degree of understanding or wisdom that each of you has gained in some spiritual sense that is more reassuring to you than everyone else's lack of that and the consequent agitation and anxiety they are dealing with.
Yes, you could frame it like that. It's in my understanding or our understanding, people who operate from this sort of understanding that we experience. It's a knowledge that's awaiting anyone and everyone. It is an assurance. Religion has famously hijacked this assurance, calling it God, and dumped this hierarchical control trap on top of people who sense it, and they go, "Oh, you acknowledge it." No, yes, we do. It is God. It is this. It is that. And come unto us, and we shall tell you what God is telling you. You know, that hijack has been is one of the most horrific in all of history. But it happens within modern society as well. Belief systems, this scientism that's taken over everything. You worship people in white coats. They've got technology. They've got this. They've got answers. But I mean, even in the realm of scientific knowledge, they're getting breakthroughs that they don't know how to handle. You look at quantum physics. The amazing thing about quantum physics to me is it doesn't get translated into society. This realization that your intention or what you're focusing on becomes real when you see it. that makes the reality, but it's not there when you're not in that mode. That doesn't get translated anywhere by any means into any level of society. It's just this, it's a discovery way out there. Society is way, way, way behind the curve. I think we're in a dark age, a very dark age. People have been blinded. Some of the examples that you gave of like the bloodsuckers and stuff like that, they're still doing it. I mean, they're reactivating electric shock right now. You probably saw in the news. They chemotherapy, radiation techniques, all this stuff is dark age scientism. This is really weird crap. Genetic modification. I mean, this is really weird, brutal, very dark, lack of any kind of conscious awareness scientism. This is weird stuff. And we're living within it. People entranced by their television. We're living in a very dark age, yet we're under the illusion that this is modern times and these are the days of illumination and all this previous. We're not in the old dark ages with sewer in the street. We have indoor plumbing and we have things to prove it. And, we have comforts and, modern technology. It's a lie. They're doing the same thing. You can see it. It's a brutal assault on our consciousness when you stand back and see what these elements are perpetrating on humanity under the illusion that it's progress. But they've always done this. Or maybe the old classic thing you learn when you're a kid is of the Dark Ages, and they're torturing people because and burning them at the stake because of their contrary religious beliefs. Well, that's happening now. It's no different. It's no different one iota. They're still torturing, literally. They're bombing nations of other religions, under false pretenses. We're in a very barbaric time, and it's barbaric to the core. That's the thing that people, come to realize. It is right down to your day-to-day way of living, your food choices. I mean, my goodness, you're not allowed to know what's in your food. I mean, are you kidding me? And the fact that it has to be labeled at all, or that there's fake food and all this kind of stuff. The vaccines, the pharmaceuticals. I mean, these are voluntary lobotomies people are undergoing, and they're persuaded into it. This is a barbaric time, and people need to see it for what it is. This is where, despite what might seem, woo-woo optimism, despite that, the very power that is within each one of us is so enormous and so powerful. And I have to reassure a lot of people that write me with things they're going through and stuff, and what do I do, or and I don't give personal advice, but I'll always say, it's within each one of us to discover the resource that's within us, and it's not a special thing. It's available to anybody and everybody. I think the way David framed it was really good. He said, use your intention and say, look, I want to go with this. I want to find out more, and then learn to go with it. Learn to listen. Learn to say yes instead of no, that doesn't fit my paradigm. Say yes. Go ahead. Take the steps. Move out of your old ways. Have some goddamn courage for once in your life. Break the mold. Get away from your old mindset, and let those things fall away. Like you beautifully said about the sculptor analogy. It's not easy. I mean, to go to your sculptor analogy, you brilliantly said during the interview that, the picture you got was there's a block of stone and there's the sculptor who envisions something within it, and he has to chip away all this stuff. At first, you don't see anything. But where does he see it? In his imagination. I mean, what is the imagination? We're told that it's some kind of storybook, airy-fairy thing that has no real meaning in life, or maybe you'll be an artist. It isn't that sweet, draw butterflies. Sorry. Imagination, intuition, empathy, these things are all connected at a very deep, deep level within the human spirit, heart, soul, whatever you want to call it. That's what is getting activated. And that's why we see beauty in these things that get uncovered by people who have vision. They can see it and they do something about it to manifest it, just like a sculptor does. And people have to be willing to get the crap chipped off of them. And it just takes a little bit of intention, a little bit of willingness. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen until we go through trauma in our lives. We find out what we were going for was a lie. And I had to go through a lot of trauma in my life. And I'm sure you have, and I know you have. And the many people, we don't come to these realizations. It's not a piece of cake. It's not airy-fairy, read a few books and, oh, this is the way it is. I mean, that's what I love about Zen Buddhism. What they tell you is what it's not. If a stupid student comes up and treats the teacher like, oh, master, tell me this and that, he might smack him and say, boy, do you have the wrong attitude. You're not getting it. It's life can be that universe, I should say, because this ultimate life force that's trying to get our attention will do what it takes to get our attention.
So you are a person who undertook a life of enormous mobility, going overseas, living abroad in places like India for 20 years, having children in other areas, parts of the world, really living for a long time. And that would be so unthinkable to so many people living in America who are so comfortable and cozy in their 2-car garage and their schedule and their families and so forth. You left everything. So something provoked you to start all over in a new place and do it a whole different way. So that's unusual about you, Zen. And I want to ask you if you can explain to listeners, how did you feel in those 20 years? What did you listen to? What guided you? How come you had such adventures and you seem to thrive through all of them?
Wow, good question. Well, first I want to remark on something that it was maybe more or less implied in what you said. People who are sort of confronted with this concept of moving and finding new realms of realization and call it awakening or whatever, we can't carry the whole world with us. It really is, like I said before, it's a very individual journey, primarily. But when each of us fulfills our journey, we will have the effect on the world about us that our heart also yearns for. We care about our loved ones. We care about the children being massacred in Gaza. We care about these things. They move our heart. They break our hearts. How do we help? How do we stop this goddamn machine that is rolling over humanity and making mincemeat of these beautiful potential lives? And these are big questions, but essentially, we can't carry that load, or it can crush us. But on the same token, it's in the back of all of our minds. We're concerned about the world. We're concerned about the planet. It's being raped. It's being destroyed. These are very hard times right now because we're obviously at a point of technological advancement that makes more massacre possible, makes more adulteration of our planet and our environment possible. So, it closes in pretty quick. And I get discouraged. I get pissed off. I say, hey, get me out of here. Send me back to where I came because this is just overwhelming. Who doesn't go through those trying times? It's a hard fight we're in. But for me personally, I don't know that when I was, I've always been very driven and very idealistic. Whatever I got into, I went all the way. I don't know what it is in me that makes me that way, but I was doing social work in many parts of the world, trying to do what I could. I got deeply into trying to understand what the Bible had to say as far as a potential solution, and got to know it really well, which worked out really well for my later awakening, to understand the human dynamic of what they think they've been going by. And then, of course, I studied a lot of other books on occultism and and different philosophies and religions and things. But I was trying to make a difference wherever I was. And I'm no saint. I'm, whether people think it's like Mother Teresa or something. I'm not. I'm a normal guy. I'm a lot of fun to be with. I'm goofy. Life to me, I mean, I laugh a lot. It's actually hilarious, this whole weird paradox we're living in, but it's also very serious, obviously, at the same time. But what drove me, I don't know, but something drove me. It's like you're saying, I guess you're alluding to this, that something was driving me. And I think it drives almost everybody. Somewhere that spark is in them. And look at children. I know there's a phenomenon with young girls wanting to be nuns when they're young. They want to just be pure and help people and love God with all their hearts. There's a huge phenomenon to that effect. I don't know about these days, but when I was growing up, there's people that go to Zen monasteries. They want to contribute. They want to pull out of the insanity of the world and just give their all to something that perhaps will make a difference as well as enhance their own lives. There's people that go into public service with great intentions. There's wonderful people in the world that trying to manifest this calling in their heart to do something. Of course, they're confined by all the social engineering and what they've been told they can do and cannot do, and what they're good for, what they're not good for. It's a maze. It's a daunting maze, this life that we're in. For me, I had to blast through many very big, thick walls in my life and go through a lot of suffering and disappointment, heartbreak, personal changes, sacrifice. But something kept propelling me, and I give credit to the universe, to the Creator, or whatever anybody wants to call it. That's helped me to keep going. And I talk about this a lot in my recent articles, that I think one of the most important qualities that we're each going to need for what's coming, because it's going to get even weirder, is determination. And with determination and sincerity, a sincere heart, we shall see fulfillment to whatever degree. We don't know. We really don't know the outcome. Anything's possible. I'm not into this. We're all going to be. Like the Christians do. We're all going to be raptured. Everything's cool. And the good people go up, and the bad people get destroyed, and then we're going to have a new heaven, new earth. I don't go for that stuff. This is a transition that's beyond our comprehension. But all that really matters is the individual's response to this calling, to the heart, to the true ultimate passion they feel of love and concern and true caring for those around them. And it's not easy. People don't stop for homeless people. Very few do. And if they do, they drop a coin and walk off. They don't talk to them. They don't ask them their story. Things like that. It's people have been divided, chopped up, restricted. They're doused with fear day after day after day. But another encouraging aspect of this, if I may, is these guys have to keep reinforcing these fear programs. Another false flag, another economic fear flag waving, another plague, another problem. Why? Because it wears off. It's just like Earth. Earth can absorb a lot of punishment. It has for a long time. We don't know its limits, but personally, I don't think there are any. Even if it got burned off, it'll revive again too. So, we're in this eternal, recreative, fantastic universe, whatever the plight of our individual selves or our planet. There's something amazingly reproducing, recreative, recreation. That's what it's all about. That's what we're part of. And that's, if we see that in the world around us and in people around us and the beauty of our families or, friends or, beautiful things happening or nature and animals, that's why people are so drawn to all these animal things on the internet. They just get reminded it's okay. There's this recreative thing. Okay, then next picture is how many whales beached and how many species of coral have died from the radiation. So again, the conflict is always there. But I think it's up to the individual to tap into it and let it play out. I mean, what are you living for now? But that's the big question. Most people have a dead end life. They're living for the quad in their backyard and their little fishing boat and a house they think is secure. And now they're finding out the whole system's crashing. The bank wants their house back. You know what? That might be good because they may not have gotten the point otherwise. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who lost everything in the bubble burst of 2008, and they went, "Wow, I'm so thankful. Now I'm living off grid, or I went to this country, or I found this beautiful place. I'm back in touch with my family. I'm gardening. You know, this has been the best thing in my life." Okay, admittedly, that might be a small percentage of the population, but it's a manifestation. I mean, another manifestation is kids now are going out to the desert for these big Burning Man type gatherings, but there's all kinds of these happening. Very similar to what happened to my generation back in the 60s, where there was this calling going on. It wasn't just political and from reading it in the news. You just got fed up with your environment. It was time to move on, and this new culture was manifesting and say, yeah, that's a hell of a lot better alternative than this. You go out there and test it out. It's happening today. It may not be quite as political, obviously not, but or as focused, whatever. But the yearning is back. It's this, and that's why they have to keep trying to put it out. They've got to keep spraying the skies. They don't just do it once and let it sit up there. They've got to keep spraying the skies. They got to keep the EMFs jacked up and put in more towers and chip our bodies and alter our food, and it's insane. But you know what? When as you wake up, you go, man, these guys are desperate. We apparently are a very formidable foe, and that's a really cool thought.
So Zen, you started your journey with the word no. You said no to what you were being offered, and you were willing to face the unknown, to take the risks that came with going on a very broad, wide, far-reaching journey. And because you had that initial power to say no, I tell people no is one of the most powerful words in the universe. All you have to do is say it. And you said it. And no kind of seeded you in the direction you went. And then you had to keep bouncing and rolling and tucking and ducking and, flying when you had the chance to. And that's why you've become what you are. And now you're back online with the philosophy you gained from this journey. But when I envision others who are ensconced in these creature comforts, as you mentioned earlier, if they would be invited to say no and take the same far-reaching, wide, broad trip that you took with different adventures, because nobody's going to live your life all over, I can only imagine them shrinking from that and saying, I'd rather, the devil is better than the devil you don't. And so just that inability to say, yes, I want to spring, I want to launch, I want to fly. I just want to do what my heart tells me to do. I don't see that built into modern man.
No, it's definitely not built in societally, but it's I maintain it's in the heart of any living soul that hasn't given their soul away. But despite the engineering by society and the occult influences and all. But it wasn't a piece of cake for me. I'm no super duper brave person. I've got the same faults as or similar faults to anyone. And there was a lot of scary times where I didn't really know what was happening. There was times I didn't have enough money or food for my little kids. I was faced with a lot of very big challenges. I got stuck in India and I couldn't get out, and I needed to, and had to write a friend who sent me a few $100 that saved our lives. And we made it out to Iran, where I got a teaching job, and my experience there, eventually I made it to the TV station, which was pretty cool. But I had to hoof it. But like you said, in the beginning, the alternative wasn't an issue. What I was handed and I grew up in Scarsdale, New York, of all places. Little Snotsville, spoiled, rotten kid. Didn't know anything about the outside world. I wanted to run away when I was a kid, but I was too scared. I didn't have no idea where to go. I was just a little newbie, a little undeveloped embryo of a human being. But I didn't like where I was. It's kind of like that analogy they tell of how an eagle gets its young out of the nest. In the nest, they will build shards and thorns and pieces of glass in the bottom. And when the eagle is ready to fly, but it doesn't want to fly, the mother will stir up the nest. She'll dig into it until it's so uncomfortable for that eagle to be in there, it'll finally go, you know what? Leaping out there and doing like mom does and trying to flap my wings is a hell of a lot better than living here. And it's the nature of nature. It's the nature of progression. And so when these and that's one of the reasons society is so comfortable. I mean, think about it. These controllers, they could take everything away from everybody and not have provided or allowed to be provided all these creature comforts. But it's worked in their favor. Everybody works for the military-industrial complex. They're building bombs and planes and technology, and they're getting their job done, building their overstructure to control the future generation, which will be morphed and turned into something very compliant. And the people involved have no freaking idea, but they're happy. They go to the football game. They wear war paint. They get out their angst at the football game and scream and yell and swear and cuss and get drunk. And then they come home and they're, okay, I'm happy now. I had my release valve. And they go back to work. They fume at the television at the stuff Obama does and spends all this money on vacations. Well, those are designed to piss people off. They're designed to bring out the angst. It's like in 1984, the 2 minutes of hate. They bring up the screen and everybody goes, yeah, and they hate the enemy, which was totally fake. There was no enemy. Faraway wars that were just fabricated. Just like today, they may be there, but they were fabricated. These are engineering techniques to let loose this angst and this discomfort that they were experiencing. So, like you said earlier, it's a lot to fight against, this lulling to sleep of humanity. And to be honest, I see a lot of people that are, more or less past hope. They've lost their free will, and that is a very scary thing. They really do not have the capacity to regain, and even if there's a calamity, to regain their inner power, their clear consciousness. And it's a very sad time. And perhaps that's one of the things that, I know you're sensing that. You're very aware of these different techniques being used to wipe out humanity, disable and eventually, reduce humanity. It's very dark stuff, but it looks like there's a vast swath of humanity that's lost its free will. And that is a very serious thing. And it does beg the question, would, what kind of intervention might be necessary to protect this race? Imagine if there's outside beings, entities that are observing, going, okay, thus far, no further. We're supposed to awaken and take care of ourselves, but now that they're not awake anymore, maybe we'll intervene. I don't know. It's just an interesting dynamic, but it's a very serious state, and it's very sad, very, very sad.
Well, I'm very glad to hear about how you had to deal with so much unknown and the kind of discomfort you went through, in the sense that, and I mean, I don't wish that on anyone, but that is part of being an adventurer, really and truly. If you're going to sail the 7 seas of the unknown, metaphorically and realistically on the, physical plane, you're going to have to live by your wits and, really get yourself through some very terrifying moments. and times, and you did it. And, that's what I don't pick up from your writing. I don't appreciate how much you've been through to become the person that you are today. And it was evidently no picnic. So I wanted the listeners to hear that. And because what happens when we hear that someone else has survived a very arduous path with the arrival in a place where they're changed from the core, and they can have this kind of resilience that you seem to have, and the confidence you have, and the belief you have in your kind of the code that now flows out of you, because that's what you're putting out. Your philosophy is kind of like a personal code. That's how I'm describing it.
Yeah, interesting.
That when people hear that, this is how he gained all this. He survived an ordeal that was this many years in the making. That means I can too, because that's what humanity is about. It's about individual survival of great challenges, and then we are storytellers. Our experiences here create our story, which is our life. And so I want people to understand that bucking up a little bit and refusing to participate any longer, refusing to do so, and there are many ways we can still refuse, is what's going to get you remade from the inside out. It's not saying, well, everybody uses PayPal, so I'm going to use it too. Everybody shops on Amazon. People go to Amazon because they don't have to hunt. Amazon gives you all the different choices, but I'll tell you, once you've experienced the dark side of Amazon a few times, you'll stop supporting an entity like that, But people don't want to shut the door on convenience because they have so much stress already. And just a little tiny bit of convenience makes such a difference. That's how everyone is looking at it, I think.
Yeah, very well said. It's there's so many traps, pitfalls, diversions, cul-de-sacs, and unfortunately, when the majority of the populace is falling for him, people draw comfort. Oh, it must be okay. Look at them; everybody else is doing it. So we go back into that lull to sleep mode. I often use the analogy, and it's been used by many, of mountain climbing. I mean, first of all, who are the people that most people admire when they think about, like you said, adventurers or pioneers? They go, oh yeah, that's great. He went down this river and he discovered this and that, or he climbed Mount Everest, or went off and did this. But I could never do that. That's for saints and special people and this kind of thing. Yet the calling is in the heart. Young kids, they want to be a fireman, they want to be a policeman and help people. They, and then as you get older and you read about some of these incredible explorers, you go, wow, wouldn't that be cool? But you go, well, I don't know. I mean, I live in suburbia. I don't even know what a jungle is. But climbing a mountain is such a good analogy, because as you go up, it gets tougher and tougher. The air gets thinner. The weather gets more extreme. There's less to live off of. It's harder to find a shelter. And, along the way, people camp out. And they, okay, I'm resting. Oh, there's a few more tents over here. And it eventually becomes a village, and they build a church. And, then you got your little thing on the side of the mountain. But the ones who want to keep going, it's a calling. And it's the thrill. It's the exhilaration of something at this summit that draws the heart. And I mean, I like to think that is within every heart, but it doesn't mean the willingness to do it is, but there's a knowledge that that's where it is. If you really want it, you have to go get it. And that's very much the case. If you really want it, you have to go get it. And it's not even as complicated as we've been led to believe. It is really, it's letting it out because it's already there. It is a beautiful transformational experience that can happen even reading books. And These things can happen, but they will have repercussions, and that's why people are afraid of going there. Well, if I find that out, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to become like that loony bin guy down there who became like an extreme conspiracy guy, or am I going to become like this? All these fears hit people, but you eventually get to the point when you really want it. You go, well, I don't care. I'm not worried about the cost, because it's going to cost everything. But you know what? When that question comes up, isn't your life going to cost everything anyway? When you leave here, it's going to cost your life. What do you have to show for it? What'd you do? Did you even attempt to live your dreams? Did you even attempt to live out your these spiritual desires or your creativity? You always wanted to be a painter. Why didn't you do it? You always wanted to go to this country. Why didn't you ever go? Are you going to be kicking yourself? Like that quote that always haunted me. It says, "Don't die with your music still in you." That's very much, it sums it up. If you've got music in you, you've got something to say. And I pound on this all the time. I'll tell people, people write me comments and I say, "You're a great writer. Why don't you do an article about that?" And a lot of people have become really prolific, and they've got their own websites, and they're all over the net now. And I'm very proud, honestly, to say that I did that, because I'm doing it in all sincerity to help them to express themselves, and they discover it. And bam, and then they inspire other people to do it. But it might be like John Rappaport. I had a fascinating interview with him on my show where he talked about his awakening, and it came through art. He wanted to express himself, and he wasn't any kind of a innate artist. He just had to express himself through art. And he tells his story about how it happened. And now he actually has he treats people using art who have, challenges in their life. And he uses the art to help them, gain their consciousness or whatever. It's not even that etheric. It's more about, kind of a therapy. But, why die with that in you? How dare we? It's a betrayal to source. It's a betrayal to the very root of our existence and why we're here. If you want to know why, well, maybe we're the living why. Be who you are, and that's the why kind of thing. But, this obviously gets me fired up. But people are going to die here anyway. What, or it's like suicide. When people take their life, the classic thing to say, why take your life? Why don't you give it away? Live selflessly the rest of your life. Just give it away. Don't go to the grave in some kind of a selfish act that's going to hurt your loved ones and just end your existence because you can't handle it. Give it away. Go down and work with the homeless, or go be a help to somebody. But that's not a very real option in most people's paradigms. But it's there anyway. That obviously I was driven to the end of myself on many occasions in my life, and that's essentially, I think everybody is. But the question is, what decision do you make when you're at that point of decision? Do you go back to the 9-to-5 job you hate? Do you go back to a relationship that's dead as doornails and it's not good for either one of you? Do you go back, to some living condition that is only a dead end? Or do you move forward? Do you step out and let universe go to work? And that's where someone like me or many other people can come along and say, hey, give it a shot. Go ahead, be a little prompt, because they're not going to get it from the system. I'll tell you that. They're not going to get it from schooling. They're not going to get it from university. They're not going to tell you that. They're going to tell you, go back, find security. The world is scarce. There's not enough to eat. What are you doing? You're an idiot. Establish your income stream. Be accepted. Make friends wherever you are. It doesn't matter. Go to the bar. Go watch football games. It's a sad reflex, but that's what's going on a massive scale. The beauty of the third world is you don't see it as pronounced, because people really are living a much more fundamental lifestyle. Or if you go back to the indigenous peoples, it gets even more empowering and more inspiring, where they lived as families and stayed in touch with their ancestors, and there's ceremony and an honoring of creation and nature. That's why these indigenous populations have been wiped out, or they're attempting to, all over the world for generations, because they defy the programming of this matrix from whatever source it's coming. And I'm convinced it's spiritually rooted, but I don't know. People just need to have some guts. God damn it. It's time. It really is time. And I hope somebody's hearing this, that maybe it'll prompt them, because really there's nothing to lose. I don't feel, I don't have trepidation about saying things like this, because come what may, it's up to them to listen to what I'm saying or not, or whatever. I mean, most of all, what they're hearing in their own heart. But it's time. It's time. This is an emergency. Our race is being exterminated. This is no freaking joke. You know, this is a time of urgency. People keep asking, why do you work so hard? You know, I'm going 18 hours a day. I can't stop because there's an urgency underlying all this. I'm not frantic. I'm very peaceful, but I'm very passionate. And it needs to be done. And there aren't enough people doing it. There never are, but that's not my business. I do what I'm supposed to do.
Well, that's great. No, I'm happy to hear all of that. And there were times when I wanted to throw something in, but you were going on and on. So that's good. You got it out. And so what I want to bring up now is, have you ever heard of a film or a book called Touching the Void?
No, I haven't.
All right. I think everyone needs to read this book. You can buy it used or go find the film. The film is a reenactment. And it's the story of two mountain climbers, very expert climbers. They were Brits from Britain. They were best friends. And they went to Peru to climb a very steep peak called Ciula Grande. And they knew that it was going to be tough. They had their base camp at the foot of the mountain. They climbed all day. And when they got to the top, they noticed that dark clouds were gathering and there was a storm coming. And that caused them great concern because they had to get down. And actually getting down can be very difficult also, because gravity is pushing you, the downward force of physics. And they started going down, and also you spent a lot of energy getting up, right? So they started going down, and they had a rope tied to each other so they wouldn't get lost or disconnected from each other. And it got darker and darker, and snow fell, and you couldn't see, and they were to the point where one of them stumbled and fell. I think I'm just now truncating terribly and shortening this, but one of them fell over a precipice, and the other one was standing, and the rope was taut, and he didn't know what had happened to his partner. All he knew was that the partner wasn't moving, he wasn't responding to tugs on the rope was just taut, he couldn't see anything, and this is how it remained. And the guy who's dangling is going, God, what am I going to do? I'm dangling in the air. And so they stood like that for over an hour. And the storm is getting worse and worse. There's no way for them to communicate. They're trying to shout, but the wind is whistling and snow is everywhere and it's very dark. So what would you do, Zen?
Interesting. I wasn't sure what the outcome of that was going to be. But, you know, I've seen this scenario play out, you know, where the one at the bottom says, look, you can't pull me up. One of us needs to make it. Go ahead and cut the rope.
They can't talk. They can't talk. So what happened?
No, I'm just saying, you know, there's that scenario, which you hear about a lot. But, boy, I mean, I'd need to know more details, I guess, you know, whether or not he could even pull him or not. And obviously it's a very difficult predicament. My goodness. I mean, obviously the guy on the top's not going to jump with him to, you know, to assuage his guilt for not saving him. But that's a tough predicament.
So he cut the rope, Simon. Yeah. He cut the rope, and Joe plunged, and he plunged, and he plunged, and he fell into a chasm, and he broke his leg. And he's stuck in this crevasse, and can't move. and everything is just incredible pain. His leg is totally broken. He knows that. And he's having to, if he had to get anywhere, he'd have to get up. How is he going to do that? And his friend, his best friend, let him slide, let him go, let him die. So he's lying there thinking, what am I going to do? How long is it going to be? So he starts screaming, enraged at God, at the universe, at life, screaming, swearing up a storm. And then he realizes, I'm just wasting energy. And he gets bummed. And he lies there, and he lies there, and he lies there. Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of starving and losing energy. It's very, very cold. And he knows that pretty soon, he's just going to die. And that's it. So it ends up that he literally sees a chink of light when it gets lighter. And he realizes there's a way out of here. And he realizes that even though he's in this crevasse, there is a flat element to it, and that he can crawl toward this light. And he does, because he makes himself, and he gets out of the hole. And then he has to crawl all the way back to base camp, which is excruciating with his broken leg. So it is an amazing story. And I won't tell you everything, there's a lot more. But it's the story of the void, and he was touching the void. And I want people to understand that the void is coming to us. I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but the void is coming, and you're going to have to touch it.
Yeah, it's here. It's always here. It's present. A lot of people fight the dark side of themselves, and they fight against evil and this kind of stuff. But they've got to confront it in themselves first. This is a very stark reality that is part of the process and very essential to anyone very seriously considering climbing the mountain. They're very it's very intrinsic to personal discovery, but also this good versus evil paradigm that and where fear gets its footing. But that reminds me. That's an amazing story. That reminds me of. Oh, by the way, notice that when his anger finally passed and his rage, he came to his senses, and he literally saw some light, which is really symbolic. But he had to go through the rage, the despair, the loneliness, that dark night of the soul. I've been through that. I know what it is. I've been through it on several occasions, and I didn't handle it very well the first few times. And I became very bitter. I became very angry. It lived with me for years. It stemmed back to my upbringing and a very oppressive, abusive father and things like that. Everybody's got this kind of story in to some degree. But it's when we get past the rage that we see the light, and expressing the rage is part of it. There's nothing wrong with it. We're human. The idea isn't just to act perfect. The idea is to be real. It's to realize your essential, fundamental, authentic self, and that does not fit in this world one freaking bit. That is not received well amongst friends, family, mates, anybody. The authentic self is dying to come out, and it doesn't need to burst out and lash out at everybody necessarily to be realized, but it's going to be part of it. But most of all, this exploration of the darker side of our own selves and what's within us, what lies within us. It's a mirror reflection of the external world, essentially, but it's part of the process. And then he found the courage and the fortitude. And thankfully, he was able to, crawl back to base camp. And you can be sure there was very interesting encounters with his friend and stuff. I'm sure they both had a wonderful reconciliation, because the guy having to cut the rope that he was faced with a decision of his own. And you can be sure on his trek down, he faced the dark side of himself and what he'd had to do, what he felt forced to do, the conflict he was placed in, and him screaming at universe and God for, why did this happen? And, I didn't like to do that. Why do I feel forced to do it? And all these things. There's not a human being that doesn't have these issues to confront. And, it's no joke. It's not a love and light gobbledygook kind of existence that we're in. It is a very real, serious, often dark entanglement of issues that stem from our earliest childhood. I talk a lot recently about codependency and how we're searching to fulfill things that we think we need from way early in our earliest childhood, from missing parents or missing love or not being understood, or ultimately, as I see it, that your authentic spiritual self was not recognized. It was not nurtured. It was not identified. It was not encouraged. We have this beautiful expression of consciousness coming out, and what do? You get societal programming. Everybody is brought up in an abused environment. I don't care who the parents were and how enlightened. Maybe there's a few exceptions, I don't know, but generally our parents didn't know what the hell they were doing. And I, as a parent, didn't know what the hell I was doing when my kids were little. I went through I just sort of parroted what I learned, and I tried to make it enlightened according to what I had learned at that point, but it had all the markings of, abusive behavior, ultimately. I don't consider myself an abusive parent, but the kids, went through stuff, and in their teen years, even more stuff that I couldn't help, and I wasn't equipped to help at the time, even if I could. They had to go through their own process. But this is a really big subject, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's a beautiful analogy. And again, we're back to mountain climbing and the hazards. People do die. The weather does become so inclement that people die making the effort, but they made the effort. It's sort of I don't know. It's a paradox. So much of life is such a freaking paradox. We can't get it with our left brain and our mind. That's where heart comes in again, and this real sense of spiritual knowledge, because it's more about being true to the drive, being true to your creative self, being true to your intuition, your sense of empathy, and learning to act on it. That's the hardest part. People can't, they can read books and get all creamy-eyed about, beautiful concepts, but what are you doing about the guy you just ran into on the street? Why didn't you stop and talk to this person here? And we're all constricted, and we go through these conflicts on very practical day-to-day bases. But that's the journey we're on. But like I said earlier, and it's an emergency. This is really an emergency. It's time for us to arise. That's why I talk about the warrior spirit. People are being called to be a form of warrior, spiritual warriors, willing to defy all of these influences that have held us back so horrifically for eons. And we have a chance to at least do our part. And we don't have to carry the whole thing. But each of us, if we take that challenge, we are each this magnificent manifestation of potential manifestation of the divine. That's really what divinity is. It's has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with fulfilling our ultimate calling of who we truly are. Even though we're encased in this frail flesh with all of its trials and tribulations, the spirit calls, and we've got to learn to follow it. And it's not easy. I've blown it so many times. It's countless. I'm no paradigm of truth or courage. I've been a coward countless times. But if we keep going, we learn. If we keep going, we're growing. If we keep going, we develop new spiritual muscles to handle the next contest. And it's like that. It's we get into training, but I'm not even that self-disciplined. I just simply, do my best to follow my heart and make sure it's guided by the right influences. But it's no piece of cake. My goodness, for anybody. If you read anybody's life story, Gandhi didn't know who he was going to be when he was a lawyer in South Africa. He just stuck to his guns here and there, and then felt called to go back to India, stuck to his guns here, there. And just because he stuck to his guns and a sense of common sense truth, all of a sudden he was exalted to this place of leadership, which I'm sure he didn't even want, but he knew he had to fulfill it because the people needed a voice. They needed something that would tell them a clear truth and stop conflict and hate and violence. And of course, as soon as he died, the guy he was working with, the whole partition happened, which was a horrific episode in history, and the two Pakistans formed, and like left brain, right brain getting separated. It was a horrific time in history. If anybody's not familiar with it, you should look it up. It's important to know. But it's all about individuals, each of us as individuals, fulfilling what it is and listening to, yielding to this creative force. And it might just be something really sweet and simple like writing songs. It might be taking better care of those around you. It doesn't have to be some big dramatic mountain climbing, flash on the landscape. It's each of us doing our part. So anyway, that story you told is very telling, and I think it's important people are willing to look at themselves just as hard as they're looking to the exterior, and not in a way that's debilitating, but in a way that's empowering.
Well, I guess the guts of that story is that by cutting the rope, Simon saved both of them. And sometimes that's all we have. We have just one place to go, and it seems very difficult. But that's what the void is all about. The void will give you a very difficult situation, and you may have only one choice. And the question is, can you do it or can't you? And if you can't, you're gonna be finished. And if you do it, then you actually create an opening. So I think people should definitely look this thing up, Touching the Void. And I could run into the other room and tell you exactly who wrote it. I think Joe was the author of the autobiography, the story. But I want to say Kevin MacDonald made the movie, and he's a great, very, very good, very brilliant documentary filmmaker. I mean, this is documentary in the most amazing form.
Wow, wonderful. What's interesting is the going to the mountain climber who had to cut the rope. It was going to save his life. He didn't know if it would save his friend's life. Probably thought he would lose it, but he didn't look at it like it's an opening at the time. This is an opening to the next stage of your life. At the time, these kinds of crises and decision points do not look like openings. That's the thing. I'm going to do this now, and all of a sudden the next door is going to open. They are the end. They look like the very end of everything you ever believed, trusted, thought, held dear. It seems like a betrayal to self. These are really bleak moments, and it's not to be minimized. And I'm really glad you brought all this up, because you're right. I haven't talked about this enough, but I've alluded to it quite a bit. But these are crises of a major sort. And hailing back to your interview with David, when he had this complete major shift, when he was so deeply embedded in the system with what he thought he was supposed to be doing, and then he got that calling through the psychic and reaffirmation of something that he was sensing, and then it became it blew up and became real. That's a crisis, and he had to experience it publicly. And not many people go through that kind of humiliation publicly, where you're getting, on the street corners and everywhere on television, being made fun of. But that's one example. But here's a man who's gone on to do what he's done, and clearly that helped create this beautiful soul and liberate him from all the crap. And this will happen. An aspect of this will happen in any real truth seeker's life. Call it a truth seeker. It's not you, but or truth manifester. It's you will. My kids have gone through weird stuff. I've gone through so many changes. My kids go, "Oh, Dad, what are you into now?" But they have a very deep respect for me because they know what I do with my whole heart. And now as the later stage kind of starts to make sense, they go, "Oh, now we get it." And they're starting to make sense out of their own lives from it, which is very, very inspiring. Not entirely. There's a whole spectrum of responses, but we have to go through these things. And it's not easy street. It is not easy street. So if you're looking for the easy way out, please turn off the show now, because it's not going to help you any. It's only going to make you uncomfortable. But if there's anything in you, there's a spark still left. I'll tell you, everything's at stake right now, including your own personal fulfillment. So I hope this is hitting home to some people.
It will hit home. And I looked it up. It's Joe Simpson, and there is the website, touchingthevoid.com. And it is an absolutely amazing book and documentary. I started out by reading the book, and then I sought the movie out and actually sold the DVD for a while. But I've run out of copies now. So Touching the Void, and we're going to all be doing it, and we're doing it now. So Zen, thank you for your inspiring words and your, I guess, very down-to-earth way of saying we've got to look at ourselves and into ourselves. And if we have to cut that umbilical cord, which is like the rope that Simon cut, then we've got to cut it. Cut that umbilical cord to the matrix. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate the discussion. I'm sorry if I appeared to perhaps drill too hard at times.
No, not at all. I love it. I really admire you, and I love your aspect. I love how you come at things, and you're just really precious.
Well, Zen, you are as well, and my hat goes off to you for all your adventures and your ability to have resurfaced, and now you're giving us all this inspiration. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon, because I'm going to do repeats with guests who have a lot to share. So thank you.
Oh, I'd love to come back. That's so sweet. And I hope we can meet up sometime. Let's see what happens. There might be an event coming up in Portland. It's not scheduled yet, but maybe I can coax you to come on up.
All right. Well, until Portland then. Okay.
Okay. Much love.
Hey everyone, this is Sofia. I want to tell you about iodine, which I've been selling on the website, avatarproducts.com. That's my online store. Iodine is a mineral that the body needs pretty much more than any other mineral. Iodine goes to every single cell in your body. It's crucial for reproductive system organs. It's crucial for the thyroid. The thyroid makes 4 hormones. It can't even make them without iodine. And what has happened, we've started to make thyroid hormone out of bromine, fluorine, and chlorine because they resemble iodine so closely as molecules. So we're getting brominated thyroid hormone, chlorinated thyroid hormone, fluoridated thyroid hormone. And those hormones regulate so many different systems in the body. No wonder we're falling behind in our cellular detoxing and housekeeping. So if you visit avatarproducts.com, you're going to see 3 different kinds of iodine. You can get a trial size for only a few dollars, 1/4 ounce. And that's a good place to start. So help yourself and feel better. Reminding you, visit avatarproducts.com, where you'll find a number of things that I have discovered, or I've even designed in some cases, that have solved problems for me. Visit avatarproducts.com.